Hello! Welcome back to my review of Last of the Jedi, The Desperate Mission. So, I've just read chapter 4, and we're back to a longer chapter. It goes on for about 10 pages. Again, I like that. It's not too long. Well, say it's not too long. It is almost the length of a usual chapter in my experience, which is 14 pages. But still, it's not extremely long. Currently on chapter 5, picks up on page 31, so I made quite good progress. But anyway, to the chapter. I quite enjoyed the chapter. Again, it's like chapter 1. It's longer but simple, and I like that. It doesn't drag. It doesn't drag on. It's well paced. Pretty much Obi-Wan has finally arrived in Usa in Belasa, and now he's looking for Ferrosolan, and we get to kind of see the environment. We're told about how Belasa was used to supply their own forces for the Republic back in the Clone Wars, and how now they're suppressed by the Empire, and how they kind of live in fear, and there are people being detained for just believing in things other than the Empire, and how people are living in fear, and how so many businesses are having to close. We get to see Obi-Wan find that Ferrosolan and what was it, Ronlands? I think it was Ronlands. How their business is fully closed. We know that Ferrosolan was, of course, imprisoned, presumably because they found out he was a Jedi. Wouldn't surprise me if Malorum was involved there, because I know he's the main villain in the first 4 books of Last of the Jedi. I know he appears in the first 4. Before, of course, eventually meeting his stew in Death on the Boo, but I'll get to that book eventually. But quite frankly, Malorum was the reason I started reading this, as well as Sankor and Hydra. But anyway, we're talking about chapter 3, not the whole Last of the Jedi things. So we get to see Obi-Wan, and he's investigating what's happened to Ferrosland, the Ferros/land, as in their little business, and he goes over to the tailor. She knows nothing. He goes into the alleyway that leads to a back door for the tailor shop, and he sees a little boy that I know is probably going to come up, because I'm fairly sure he's on the front cover of the next book. I know he's on the book after that. Yeah, it's the book after that. Underworld is what it's called. I know he's on that cover. So as soon as they said he had a shock of bluish hair, I knew it was that boy. I don't know the character's name. I can't remember it, but I know he's. That's probably him. Anyway, he doesn't know anything, and he reminds Obi-Wan of Anakin, which, again, it pains Obi-Wan, but it also charms him in a way, I think. I'm fairly sure he just say something along the lines of that. I don't think it says it charms him, but, it said that he had the kind of same sensibilities in that Anakin had, that used to irritate and charm Obi-Wan. So I assume that's the same thing he's getting, but with a bit of grieving pain. Anyway, then he goes off to something like Mariner's or Marina's cafe. Good old Marina. And she cooks a meal for Obi-Wan, and they have a little bit of a conversation. Obi-Wan's asking about what happened to Ferrosolan, and that he's a friend, and the woman gets a bit suspicious. She's very clearly good-hearted. She very much is I very much like to view her as a sweet old lady. But or shall we go with Gormander? No. But she's very sweet with what we see of her. But she of course gets a bit suspicious of Obi-Wan, especially after he said, "I'm a friend of Ferris Solon. I've travelled a long way to come and see him." And she gets suspicious in case he's an Imperial spy, because even the most simplest of conversations could turn out to go really bad really quickly for them, and for people. And she says, "If you were a friend, you'd know what happened to him, and you most certainly wouldn't say who you are." And eventually they hear stormtroopers. Eventually she hears a stormtrooper raid coming, and she pushes Obi-Wan out, saying, "If they don't see you, perhaps they won't come in." And so she leaves Obi-Wan out on the street. Eventually the stormtroopers see Obi-Wan and they start to chase him down. But Obi-Wan then rushes back to the alleyway, the grav sled that the young boy was leaning on earlier comes flying through, almost knocking Obi-Wan over. And it's filled with the beans. And Obi-Wan hops on once he sees the boy on there. So and that's where this chapter ends off. I do look a bit ahead in the book. There are about 20 or so chapters, so you know that's not too bad for a. I think that's a bit reassuring with this book, because I was expecting something like 16, but 20 I actually quite like that. Typically I don't like there being loads of chapters in a book, but 20 chapters, I quite like that for a book that's only 160 or so pages. I quite like that. It's quite nice, because it's about half the length of Plagueis, and that was 31 chapters, 33 if you want to count the prologue and epilogue as chapters. So I quite like this. It's about half the length, with close to the chapters Plagueis had. So yeah, I quite like that. I do. But yeah, I'm quite invested with the book. I've read about 30 pages of it, and usually I don't read that much in one day. But I'm on to chapter 5. Usually with Plagueis, I was doing about 3 chapters a day. I've done 4 here. So to be fair, when I was reading Therefore I Am, the Tale of IG-88, I went through about chapter 4, I think, or 5, straight to chapter 14. So I went through a lot of chapters in a single day when I read that. But yeah, quite enjoy this book, and can't wait to read more. But I think I'm going to need to have a bit of a break for a moment, as my thumbs keep aching from having to hold the book open. So yeah, but quite enjoying the book. I think this is definitely a book that I think some people will love, some people would hate, because I would say this is probably what the Obi-Wan show should have been. It shouldn't be, and if they did go with this, it shouldn't have been called Obi-Wan. But I think a lot of people would have been happier with this than the Obi-Wan show we got. I like the Obi-Wan show that we got, but I think people would have been happier with this from what I've read so far. It's just the basic premise of Obi-Wan leaving Tatooine for the sake of a Skywalker, but yeah, I think a lot of people would prefer this over the Obi-Wan show we winded up getting. But yeah, I don't know why I'm still rambling on. I quite enjoyed the chapter. Again, it has a lot of world building in it. It isn't overly it doesn't go deep into the exposition. You know, we're not detailing every single day that ever happened on Belasa, but and Usa, and the city of Usa. But it's a good. It's just enough to keep you invested, just enough to keep you informed, but it was good. And I do like the shop owners. You know, they have a charm to them, and they feel quite real. They're quite. It's just a charm with this chapter. So yeah. Can't wait to read more. Hopefully I remember what happens, because I was struggling with that at the end of chapter 1. I was trying to remind myself of what was going on, and I reread that little aspect, and I was trying to remember what was going on with the Abyssian bartender, trying to remember what Obi-Wan bribed him for, and so just keep a lookout for Obi-Wan, and make sure people don't get suspicious and stuff. But yeah. Don't know why I'm still rambling on, honestly. Thank you all for watching, and goodbye.